Hi everybody, and welcome to the second episode of Musings of an Internist. Today I wanted to discuss the topic of hospital patient care for an internist or MRP work, and specifically focus on transitioning into MRP care while you're in it, in the deep end, and then transitioning off service. So let's start. Typically in the day or two before you take over the patients, I would notice that I would feel a bit more anxious or on edge. And typically it would be because of thoughts that sound something along the lines of, well, there are just way too many patients to see safely, or what if I miss something along that flavor. What I found helpful is to really sit down and write down exactly what I'm thinking. And at first I was having a lot of actual trouble even identifying that, even catching my thoughts. First, because they sounded very factual. Well, there are just way too many patients, of course. But two is because I wasn't really able to pay attention to my mind. So it took some practice. But once I started to pay attention, then you can write them down. And once you slow them down, try to answer them. If you're asking yourself, what if something goes wrong? Then try to write down the answer to it. Physically write it on paper. I found it calmed my thoughts down. It provided some legitimate answers. And it just naturally kind of resolved some of those issues. The other thing that I found helpful is in the beginning, when I started to notice how anxious I was about the whole thing, then I was starting to feel anxious about my anxiety. There was just so many layers to it. So now I kind of allow myself to still feel anxious about it, because my mind still tells me there are a lot of patients to see, and you can argue whether that is true for somebody or not true for somebody else. But I allow that anxiety to be there, but I try to welcome it and just let it sit in my body. And what that looks like is I will take 5 to 10 minutes of just breathing with it. I say hello to it, welcome, nice to see you again. Let's just sit down and be together. The other thing that I have let myself do without the attachment of guilt is do preparation. I used to have a lot of feeling of something related to shame or something along that line for doing preparation. So I would do prep work before I start as MRP. I would research my patient as much as I can and be more or less a bit more prepared before I took over care. Now, that is just a practice I choose now. I still allow myself time before I take over care to prepare, to go through the charts, to find out as much as information as I think is necessary, and not attach any sort of feeling to it. And not attach a sense of guilt or that other people might not have to do that. I am still in the early stage of my career, and I actually now view it as very informative. I think it's beneficial for me. I think it makes me a better doctor. And at the end of the day, it's just the thoughts that I'm thinking about it. But before, it was driven by possibly more shame and inadequacy, but now I feel like that is something that I'm choosing to think positively about, and I want to continue doing at this time. Now let's talk about, you're now at work, you've taken over all the patients, everybody wants an update, patients are crashing, things are going well. So let's talk about that first day. It's usually the toughest because a lot of things are coming up. You don't know the patients well enough yet, so you have to prioritize and move forward. I think a lot of us in internal medicine have gotten good at external calm, but internal still requires a lot of work. There's still a lot of narratives that are not helpful. Now, there are people who have become quite masterful at this, and I'm watching you carefully, but a lot of us still struggle with this. My husband actually provided a great analogy for me to use for work. And this was an example of this man who was training at the monastery. I think his name was Jesse Itzler. And he was told by the monks to wash the dishes, to wash these 500 dishes. And while he was washing them, they kept bringing more dishes. And he said, how am I going to clean all these dishes? And they told him, Jesse, there's not so many dishes. There's just this one dish in your hand. And I think that's an important reminder for us at work to consider as well. There are a lot of patients, but there's only that one patient in your hand. Now, the reality is somebody will try to throw more dishes at you while you're at work, and you're going to have to put that dish down and prioritize another one because it's dirtier and more sick. but you can only focus on one patient at a time. Let's talk about the transition off service or finishing up MRP care. That usually comes at a time when you've dealt with a lot of emergencies, you've met a lot of new patients, you've had a lot of difficult conversations. Some things have gone well, other things have not gone so well, and you're almost at a place of depletion. After speaking with my colleagues, I get a sense that a lot of physicians experience this, where you feel like you almost have nothing else to give at that stage. And that is because of the thoughts we're thinking. We're often focused on the negative things that have occurred, and we don't even give ourselves a chance to appreciate the good things that have happened. So what I have found helpful is the following day or the night after, just take some time and really to write down your thoughts about the interactions that you've had, about the patient outcomes that you've had. What are you making it mean about yourself? Why are you dwelling on those things? Because it's just your thoughts creating those feelings that you're experiencing. You don't want to be carrying that around with you and coloring the rest of your life. That is not to say that I don't think that there are lots of things that we can fix in the current practice or the culture of medicine. In fact, I think there are lots of things that we can make so much better for our patients and ourselves. But it doesn't come from a place of messy emotion. If you clean up your thoughts about it first, then you can approach it with a clean slate. You can bring the factual information to the institution, to your colleagues for feedback, and have a conversation, not just blaming and accusing and pointing fingers. So I encourage you to practice this as well, because I think this is the only way that we can get through this career with an open heart and providing good care to our patients. Thanks so much for joining me again. It's been a pleasure to share this information and to share my thoughts, and I'm very excited to see you again.